Grab your Bibles. Our scripture reading for this morning will be taken from Matthew chapter 10. Matthew chapter 10, we'll begin reading in verse 1. I'll be reading from the New American Standard Bible again this morning. And having summoned his 12, he gave them the authority over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal every kind of disease and every kind of sickness. Now the names of the 12 apostles are these: the first, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew his brother, and James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collector, James the son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanian, Judas Iscariot, and one who betrayed him. These 12 Jesus sent out after instructing them, saying, "Do not go in the way of the Gentiles, do not enter any city of the Samaritans, but rather go to the lost sheep of Israel. And as you go, preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. Freely you have received, freely give. Do not acquire gold or silver or copper for your money belts, or a bag for your journey, or even 2 tunics or sandals or a staff, for the worker is worthy of his support. And into whatever city or village you enter, inquire who is worthy in it, and abide there until you go away. And as you enter the house, give it your greeting, and if the house is worthy, let your greeting of peace come upon it. But if it is not worthy, let your greeting of peace return to you. And whoever does not receive you, nor heed your works as you go out of that house or of that city, shake off the dust of your feet. Truly I say to you, it will be more tolerable in the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than that city. Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves." Skip to verse 28. "And do not fear those who kill the body, but are unable to kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both body and soul in hell." The title of our lesson this morning is No Fear. You ever served as within an apprenticeship? Ever been an underling, an assistant, an intern? You ever been on not the varsity squad, but the JV squad? What do all of those things imply? Not the one that is in charge, but preparing to do the work. What feelings do you get whenever it was your first varsity game and you had been on JV? What kind of feelings go through your mind and your heart as you receive that title or that position that you had worked so hard for, and now it's your turn to perform? What kind of butterflies do you get? We can get pretty excited sometimes. Maybe even some of you get to the point where you are physically ill whenever those types of pressures come to bear, maybe similar to a preacher giving his first sermon before a congregation. Even worse still, whenever it's a tryout sermon before a congregation. Jesus is separating from 12 men that he has spent some time with, and I want you to think about separating them from them, and they are being called to the front. And in fact, they are being told, you go, and the imagery is, I'm staying, you go and preach the kingdom of heaven is at hand. What must it have been like for those disciples, actually they are called apostles within this passage here, to have accepted that charge of Jesus, and now to be those ones that are in position of taking all of those things that they have heard him say, and they be the ones to be saying them? Do you think they were maybe just a little bit worried? Do you think any of them were taking notes? If they were, I'm sure the others were saying, hey, let me borrow your notes. And Jesus, if you read this chapter, actually says to them, don't worry about what you are going to say whenever you get before kings and governors and whenever you go before the courts. Don't worry about that, because you are going to be given. That would be encouragement, right? To be given the words that you are going to say. That would have been of comfort to them. And you say, well, Jesus was separating them from them, though. Well, physically he was, but spiritually and mentally, what was he saying to them? Have no fear, my child. I am with you. And the reason that we skip to verse 28 within our reading is because he is admonishing them to keep their priorities. He says, keep your focus. Not everybody is going to like what you had to say. And in our reading that we just had, there are going to be some houses that do not receive you, perhaps some towns that even cast you out. Remember this, that if they will not accept your message of the kingdom of heaven is at hand, that they are not rejecting you. They are rejecting me. I am with you. I am with you, not simply to strengthen you, but to back you up. In fact, it's going to be more tolerable on the day of judgment for cities like Sodom and Gomorrah than for those towns that reject the message that you are going to be bringing them. What do you place your confidence in? What gives you courage? What is it that makes you strong? We're going to look very briefly at 3 Old Testament examples. A couple of those examples are those who aren't quite up to snuff whenever it comes to having the courage that they need. And then the final one just seems to be infused with righteous courage. Let's go first and look at Moses. If you'd like to turn to this incident, you can turn to the book of Exodus. This is the scene here in Exodus where Moses is standing before the burning bush in Exodus chapter 3. And like I said, we're just going to highlight some of these. If you want to stop and read, you may. But Moses is a shepherd, and he has been at this point for 40 years. And he has wandered through the wilderness within the land of the Midianites, and he comes upon this scene where there is a bush that is burning and it's not consumed. And so he turns aside. Who is it that is within the bush? Well, it's God. And in fact, God identifies himself as being the God of Moses' ancestors. He says, I am the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob. And there results this conversation between God and Moses. And it starts off with, take your sandals off, because the ground that you are walking on is holy. But then God begins to give his commission. And very similar to what we have with Jesus, with the 12 apostles, giving them directions and commands, he charges and he says to Moses, Moses, I have heard the prayers of my people. They are oppressed, and I have decided to deliver them. And you be the man that is going to deliver them. Moses, I want you to go to Egypt. I want you to go to Pharaoh, and I want you to tell him to let my people go. And I'm going to put it within your power to do miracles. I'm going to give you the ability to do things that are unnatural, and that will prove to Pharaoh that you are from God, and eventually he is going to let you go with the people and listen to what you have to say. Now, what is Moses' response? Moses has been in the palace before, hasn't he? He has experienced the hustle and the bustle and the power that is within the palace. He experienced that for 40 years. And now for 40 years, he has lived a relatively quiet life, right? Beside still waters and green pastures. Moses has experienced that hustle and bustle of the palace, and he has preferred to be a shepherd. And so he's resistant here. Now, what I want to ask you is this question. When was the last time that you made a career change? Age 25, 30, 40? You say, boy, a career change at age 40, you should be about to your 20-year certificate by the age 40. Can you imagine having a career change at age 80? You say, 80? A career change? By 80, we're stuck in our ways, aren't we? By 80, we're complacent, if you will. By 80, we're making plans for the end of our life. Did I go too far there? Moses is 80 years old, and God says to Moses, Moses, I've got something for you to do. No, I don't want you to go and to be in the courts of Pharaoh, as in being another one of his sons. No, I don't want you to be just a shepherd wandering the wilderness with the flock of sheep. Moses, I've got plans for you. You're making a career move. You're going to become the leader of my people. Lord, I don't want to be. Choose somebody else. And he begins to make excuses for the reasons why he shouldn't. What does God know about Moses that Moses doesn't know about himself? That for too long Moses has relied upon himself. And it's now time for Moses to rely upon God instead. And if he can get Moses over this hump and get him to see things God's way, then he can work with him. And so he puts it to him, and it's not just a burning bush. It's his staff being thrown down and turned into a snake. It's his hand being put into his cloak, coming out leprous, putting it back in, coming back out, and it's pure again. It's a confidence-building exercise here with Moses. Okay, if you've got to have somebody to go with you besides me, then Aaron. You can take Aaron, and he will be your mouthpiece. And Moses is eventually convinced to walk with God. He is the humblest man, by the way, the meekest man that ever walked the earth, save Christ, of course. But he didn't get there without the provision, without God's guidance, without faith in what God was going to do through him. The second example that we want to go to is within the book of Judges. Turn with me to Judges chapter 6. Similar circumstance in that we have the people of God that are in need of help. And in Judges chapter 6, beginning in verse 1, we see it's a period of time where the children of Israel are under the thumb of an enemy nation. It just is ironic that it's the same place that Moses was called out of, being a shepherd in the land of Midian. But this is sometime, of course, after Israel's deliverance from Egypt and their establishment and conquest within the land of Canaan. But Israel has sinned. And because of that sin, God has allowed them to be oppressed. It's not as if they are living in POW camps, but they are living in caves. Why are they digging holes for themselves? Why are they carving out caves within the mountainside? It's because every time that they try to raise a crop, the enemy nation comes in and they invade them and they take their land or their crops or whatever livestock they have amassed. And it's getting to the point that if God doesn't intervene, they're not going to survive. And so they cry out to God. And in this particular setting, we have Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar, Deborah, Gideon. He's the fifth judge. And so in this particular setting, God has come to a man that's taking care of crops in secret for fear that he is going to lose them if he does them like he usually does. And God comes to Gideon and he says, Gideon, I have heard the prayers of my people, and I have come to tell you that you're the man for the job to deliver them. God chooses Gideon over anyone else. Listen to this. Now, this is Judges chapter 6, beginning in verse 11. Then the angel of the Lord came and sat under the oak, which was at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash, the Abezerite, as the son of Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress in order to save it from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, the Lord is with you, O valiant warrior. I think that this is a prophecy. I don't think that this is necessarily true about Gideon at this point. What we have seen is Gideon is threshing his wheat in the winepress, because if he threshes his wheat where he normally does, then it's going to be obvious to the Midianites and they're going to come and just take it from him. So this is a valiant warrior here. He's doing things on the sly. The angel of the Lord comes to him and says, I have come to you, O valiant warrior. And Gideon's got some questions. Did you ever have a question for the boss as the apprentice? What's this all about? What do you do with this? Well, Gideon has been approached by the angel of the Lord with this title, and he's got some questions. A valiant warrior of the Lord? No, Gideon doesn't see himself that way. Look at verse 13. Then Gideon says, oh, my Lord, if the Lord is with us, then why then has all of this happened to us? And where are all his miracles which our fathers told us about, saying, does not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian. Every once in a while, a child of God will be taken aside by a person of the world and straightened out. Every once in a while, a preacher or a teacher will be taken aside and told by somebody who is of the world that they are just so naive in the way that things are. They just really don't understand what's really going on. Gideon here has pulled aside an angel of the Lord, and he says, let me just straighten you out on this concept of what you think about the Lord being with me and with our nation. He says, look around you. He says, do we look like a nation that is in control? We can't even control our own harvest by implication. Do we look like a nation that is well off? Look at all the trouble that we are in. You say God is with us, then where are the miracles? They got the miracles whenever he led them out of Egypt. I haven't seen any miracles. And here you say that I am a valiant warrior. You think that this is the workings of the Lord and that he is with us? He says, "Oh, contrary, I tell you, God is nowhere near this place." Whoa, that's a little bit stronger than even Moses did, isn't it? At the burning bush. Is this a willing participant? This is one of those apprentices that come into it because their father signed them up, not because the individual wanted to be a welder or to be an electrician or a plumber, that they didn't want to have any part of this. I don't want to be a mechanic, right? And so Gideon is arguing with an angel of the Lord, but what has God stated at the very first in verse 12? The Lord is with you, O valiant warrior. And so he responds to Gideon's question in verse 14. The Lord looked at him and said, "Go in your strength and deliver Israel from the land of Midian. Have I not sent you?" Now, we know that's not the whole story. There's more to do with a fleece that's wet and the ground is dry, and the ground is dry and the fleece is wet, and all of that stuff is still to come. But Gideon does finally accept, but we would say that he is not a willing participant, wouldn't you? In fact, both Moses and Gideon deliver God's people, but neither one of them jump at the chance to be a leader of the children of Israel. How old do you think Gideon is at this point? Let's just put him middle age, okay, right around there. And so we have an 80-year-old, we have a middle-aged man, and now we have a young boy. Turn with me to 1 Samuel chapter 17. You know the story. And once again, if you would like to turn there and to read it for yourself, we're just going to be highlighting these things. But David is a shepherd boy. He's not even old enough to be within the military yet. At least that's implied, because he's the youngest of the brothers, and he has 3 older brothers that are within the army of Saul. And so he has been treated like the younger brother so far. It was the younger one that got to take care of the sheep. It was probably a position that you didn't desire all that much, because it did seem to just get passed down to the youngest. And then whenever you were the youngest, who do you give it to? I guess David has been kind of stuck with this. And his dad says to him, "I want you to go out and visit the boys. I want you to take some cheese with you. I want you to take some food. Go and check on them, and then bring word back." And as David approaches the camp of the Israelites, it is butted up against the camp of the Philistines, which is their enemy. And for 40 days, this has been going on, that David witnesses, where a giant of a man by the name of Goliath comes out of the Philistines, and he says, "Let's not fight army to army. You just send out one of yours and I'll fight him, and whoever is the victor, the other nation will be their servant." How tall is Goliath? It says he is 6 cubits and a span. Do you know how tall that is? That is 9 foot 5 inches. He is really tall. This man is so strong that the armor that he wears weighs 125 pounds. That would be a pretty good arrow-proof vest, wouldn't it? The spear, the head of his spear that he carries, weighs 15 pounds. Well, you don't even have to chuck that joker, right? You just drop it on somebody, and they're a goner. And Goliath stands there, and he boasts, and he says, "Where is this man of Israel that would fight me?" That's like trying to play one-on-one with Shaq, right? In fact, this guy's like 1.5 feet taller than Shaq. It's just not wise. Who willingly is going to go to their death? Who in their right mind is say, "I'm going to take that challenge"? Because everyone within their right mind sees things through their own eyes. But this little shepherd boy, he approaches the scene, and he doesn't see things through his eyes. He sees things through the eyes of Jehovah. And he has some national pride. And what he sees is a man that is taunting God's army. And he even says as much. And he goes to those soldiers. He says, "Nobody is taking up this challenge. Is nobody going to fight? I'll fight him. I'll do it. The Lord will deliver me." You see, for David, there is a natural progression within his mind that goes from bears to lions to giants. If God will deliver me from the paw of the bear, if God will deliver me from the paw of the lion, and what that tells us is that David met some pretty great opposition as a shepherd. He says, "This giant I can take on." Now, he hasn't been trained in the ways of war. In fact, King Saul tries to give him his armor and his sword, and David just sets it all aside, and he says, I can't use all of that stuff. Just give me back my sling and my staff. And with sticks and stones, this shepherd boy heads out, and he's going to meet Goliath, and Goliath meets the challenge, and he says, "Oh, look at this. Are you sending out a boy to fight me? What am I? Am I a dog? I'll tell you what, boy, I'm going to make your body food for the birds today. I'm going to destroy you. And David says something with regards to his faith. If you want to look in 1 Samuel 17 and verse 47, he turns to Goliath and he says these words. He says, the battle belongs to the Lord. He will give the victory. You know who's going to be fed to the birds today, buddy? Not me. Not me. In fact, Goliath, I'm going to cut off your head, and your soldiers are going to be routed, and they are going to become bird fodder today. That comes from a shepherd boy with a sling within his hands. Now, wait a minute. We had an 80-year-old man approached by a burning bush, which should have built some confidence, turning staffs into snakes and back again, turning his hand leprous and then back pure again. We have had possibly a middle-aged man not willing to even allow an angel of the Lord to encourage him, but instead doubting and questioning him. And it wasn't until after offering that sacrifice upon the altar, which was consumed by fire there before the angel of the Lord, does Gideon actually even begin to have a conversation with God. And lack of confidence there? I guess so. Is he ready for his apprenticeship? I think not. And yet here we have this boy, no burning bush, no miracles, no sacrifice consumed by fire, facing a giant and seeing possibilities. What's going on? It doesn't matter how old you are. What matters is your faith. Righteous courage does not necessarily come with age. It comes within confidence of the Lord. David has already learned that with the lion, that the lion is going to fall at his feet, that the bear is going to lie there upon the ground. What is a giant? The battle is the Lord's, and he is but a tool within the Lord's hands. And so he can say with confidence, without a shred of fear within his voice, the victory belongs to the Lord. I fight with the Lord because the battle is his. Okay, in your mind, jump back with me now to where we had our reading in Matthew chapter 10. And what I want you to fix your minds upon is we have the same God that delivered Israel from Egypt, the same God that delivered Israel from the hand of the Midianites, the same God that delivered Israel from the hand of Philistines. And he chose his vessels to work for him, not because they were old or middle-aged or experienced. He chose his vessels because they would at least eventually come to trust him and to do his will. And here in Matthew chapter 10, before the time of Jesus dying upon the cross, he is allowing his disciples to get their feet wet, and he is sending them out. Surely every single one of these, after having spent so much time with Christ, would be full and strong with courage. Surely every one of these will prove to be faithful. Surely there is not a man amongst this bunch that lacks righteous courage. There is one, isn't there? The others might not quite be ready for the task just yet, although they do come back from this being sent out, and they boast to God, to Christ, of those things that they were able to do. But who is the one that didn't prove true? Not ready for the apprenticeship, hadn't lived like he should or listened, hadn't focused upon walking with God, who still sees things through his own eyes. And it's the guy that's carried the purse all along. It's Judas, isn't it? It's Judas Iscariot. Now, why would Christ pick Judas? Have you ever wondered that? If Christ is such a good judge of character, why would he even choose Judas to be amongst the 12? Because it was prophesied that there would be a son of perdition. And Judas fulfills that prophecy as one that is lost because he betrays the Savior. And just as a side, what I want to point out right here is we all have free will. You accept that, don't you? That you accept that Moses could have said no? Do you accept that? That Gideon didn't have to do at that time? That David didn't have to face the giant? And evidence is clear that in the 12, that one of even the 12 ultimately turned against the master. Let's just try to get inside of Judas's head for a little bit. What is he thinking? What is it that he sees? He's got the treasury. He's got the purse within his hands. What is on Judas's mind? It's himself. It always has been and will be until his death. All he can think about is, I've got the purse, and so I've got control. And what Judas has been doing with the money has not been good. Do you remember? It's been revealed to us within the scriptures that Judas was taking just a little bit of money for himself all along. He couldn't even be trusted with this particular thing that God had given him to do. Why would they need money, by the way, as the disciples? Well, they got to buy food to eat. Remember in John chapter 4, whenever they go into the Samaritan town and Jesus sits there at the well. And you say, well, wait a minute. He sent these 12 out without a money purse, without an extra sandal or coat, told them to rely solely upon the compassion of those that they were preaching the message to. But that was so that they would trust in whom? In God, in him. Fear not, my child, I am always with you. It wasn't that Judas couldn't have accepted the message and be strong, but Judas couldn't see past his own doubts. He couldn't see past his own views. He couldn't see past his own plans for the future. Isn't that nice? We don't struggle with any of that today. That there's not a one of us here that has a problem accepting God's will within our lives. That we are always focused upon our jobs, never upon the bank account or amassing material, but on the job that God gave us, not upon the advice of our peers or the size of the foe. We never get distracted, right? By our weaknesses, by our frailties, by our inabilities. Judas was human, but he did not trust in the Lord, and he will deliver you. He did not see it that way. In myself, I failed the Lord. And then I was afraid to try once more. That fire in my soul had fled. That's when Jesus came and said, my spirit gives the strength you need to raise you up and to succeed. And for the visions in the night, to you I'll give these words of light. And he said, my child, don't look behind. Discouragement is all that you will find. Don't watch the waves that roll the sea. Just focus your eyes on me, and I will make you strong, and then your shattered courage I will mend. And if you fail and should get hurt, remember these eternal words. Fear not, my child, I am always with you. I feel every pain and every tear I see. Fear not, my child, I am with you always. I know how to care for what belongs to me. In what do you place your confidence and your trust? The lesson from Moses, from Gideon, and from 11 of those 12 apostles currently there in Matthew chapter 10 is to trust in the Lord. Lean not upon your own understandings, and he will direct your steps. If you're not his child, won't you come as we stand and as we sing?